On my 27th birthday, the room smelled like wealth that never belonged to me. Crystal glasses clinked softly. Expensive perfume hung in the air. Laughter floated around the table, polished and effortless. I sat straight in my chair, wearing a black dress I'd bought years ago for a job interview I hadn't even gotten. My grandfather raised his champagne glass and smiled at me. "So, Nora," he said casually, "how do you spend your $3.4 million trust fund?" The world tilted. I blinked once. Then again. My, what? The sound of silverware stopped instantly. My mother's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. My father swallowed hard, his jaw tightening. The chandelier above us felt suddenly too bright. "What trust fund?" I repeated. My grandfather, Henry Cole, didn't laugh. He didn't look surprised. He simply studied my face like a man confirming a terrible suspicion. "The trust one created when you were born," he said calmly. "Your parents were meant to transfer control to you when you turned 25. I felt cold spread through my chest. My name is Nora Cole, and until that moment, I believed I understood my family. I was raised on unspoken rules. Smile politely. Never argue at the table. And above all, never ask about money. Wealth existed around us like oxygen, invisible but essential, and never discussed. I didn't live like them anymore. I lived in San Francisco, in a cramped Mission District apartment with peeling paint and loud pipes. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, surviving job to job, invoice to invoice. My savings barely breathed. But it was my life. Honest. Earned. My parents, Richard and Elaine Cole, lived 20 minutes away in Marin County. 4 bedrooms. Heated pool. 2 Teslas. Conversations with them were shallow and timed. Housework, followed by "that's nice, then goodbye." The last surprise they'd given me was at my college graduation. I'd walked across the stage holding $70,000 in student loans. They hugged me proudly and handed me a gift. Inside was a book, Personal Finance for Young Adults. I smiled for photos. Then cried alone that night. Back at the restaurant, my grandfather lowered his glass. "Where did the money go?" he asked. And in that moment, under chandeliers and forced smiles, I understood something terrifying. This dinner wasn't a celebration. It was a reckoning. Success, in my family, was measured in silence. If you didn't complain, you were strong. If you didn't ask, you were grateful. So I didn't ask. I paid rent late more times than I'll admit. I skipped dinners with friends. I said no to trips, birthdays, anything that cost more than comfort allowed. While my parents posted photos from Europe, I laughed it off and said, maybe next year. I worked nights, designing logos at my kitchen table while the city hummed outside. Coffee went cold beside unpaid bills. But every dollar was mine. A week before my birthday, my manager called me into his glass-walled office. "I'm sorry, Nora," he said gently. "We are downsizing." I packed my desk into a box, rode the bus home, and collapsed onto the couch beside my roommate, Jade. She'd been my constant for 2 years. "Your parents will help, right?" she asked carefully. I laughed. It sounded empty. "They'll probably recommend a spreadsheet." That night, I called anyway. "Mom, I lost my job." "That's unfortunate," Elaine said, typing loudly in the background. "But you'll manage. You always do." "I'm behind on rent." "I don't know how." "Well, maybe this will teach you better money habits." "Anyway, we booked your birthday dinner. Atelier Cren. 7:30. Dress nicely." "Mom, that place is $300 a plate." She laughed. "Don't be dramatic. It's your birthday." The line went dead. I stared at the dark TV screen, seeing my own tired reflection. Jade looked at me. You don't have to go. Yes, I said quietly. I do. In my family, missing dinner was unforgivable. The days crawled by. Rejection emails piled up. My savings dropped below $1,000. I stopped sleeping. On Saturday, I chose the only dress that still felt acceptable and rode the bus downtown, watching strangers laugh through the window. Their lives looked light. Simple. The restaurant glowed with glass and gold. My parents were already there. Elaine wore red silk. Richard wore confidence. Happy birthday, she said, air-kissing my cheek. You look exhausted, my father added. I lost my job, I said softly. He nodded. That happens. And then the door opened. Henry Cole entered the restaurant like time itself, slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Silver hair. Sharp eyes. Authority earned, not worn. Happy birthday, Nora, he said, pulling me into a firm hug. For the first time all night, I breathed. He sat beside me and ordered whiskey. Polite conversation followed, but there was tension in his voice, like he already knew something we didn't want revealed. Then he raised his glass. So, he said lightly, how are you enjoying your trust fund? The silence was violent. What trust fund? I asked. My mother laughed too quickly. Dad, you must be confused. Don't, he said softly. He turned to the waiter. Private room. Minutes later, the door closed behind us. The air felt colder. His assistant, Laura, stood inside with a tablet. A man in a tailored suit waited beside her, Daniel Moore, his attorney. This won't take long, my grandfather said. I want clarity. Daniel slid documents toward me. Ms. Cole, he said, this trust was established under your name at birth. Initial value, $1 million. Projected current value, approximately $3.4 million. I stared at the papers. As of today, he continued, the balance is $200,000. The room spun. Explain, my grandfather said calmly. My father wiped sweat from his forehead. We used some of it, temporarily. For what? Henry asked. Mortgage payments. Cars. Renovations. Investments. Laura read aloud from the tablet. Teslas. Real estate ventures. Luxury travel. Then she paused. Malibu property. Purchase price, $1.8 million. Registered to Richard and Elaine Cole. A beach house. That was an investment, my mother whispered. It was theft, my grandfather replied. Silence swallowed us. Give me the keys, he said. Elaine hesitated, then placed them on the table. My grandfather slid them to me. These belong to you, he said. 2 years overdue. They were still warm in my palm. You'll hear from my lawyers, he added. My parents left, smaller than I'd ever seen them. Henry turned to me. I'll order a full audit. Pressing charges is your decision. I nodded numbly. That night, I went home with keys in my pocket and a storm in my chest. Everything I thought I knew had been a lie. 3 days after my birthday dinner, I stood inside my grandfather's office for the first time. The building rose like a blade of glass against the city skyline, sharp and unforgiving. I hadn't slept since that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's shaking hands sliding the keys across the table, my father's silence screaming louder than any confession. Rachel met me in the lobby, flawless as ever, tablet tucked under her arm. They are here, she said quietly. My stomach tightened. Both of them? She nodded. They came to negotiate. Negotiate. The word felt wrong. The elevator carried us to the top floor, opening into a space that smelled like cedar and old money. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city below. My grandfather, Edward Lawson, sat behind his desk, posture straight, hands folded calmly. Across from him sat my parents. They looked smaller. Older. Stripped of the confidence they wore so effortlessly before. "Sit, Clara," my grandfather said gently. I took the chair opposite them. The ticking of an antique clock filled the silence. Finally, my father spoke. "We never meant for it to go this far." Edward's voice was cold. "You didn't mean to get caught." My mother leaned forward, tears already forming. "We were desperate." The market crashed. "The mortgage," Jonathan Price stepped forward, placing a thick stack of documents on the desk. "The forensic audit is complete," he said. "Every transaction has been traced. Multiple properties, vehicles, luxury expenses, all funded through Clara's trust." He turned a page. "This qualifies as felony financial fraud and breach of fiduciary duty." My mother gasped. "Clara, please. We love you." I looked at her hands, perfect nails, expensive rings, hands that had signed away my future. "I didn't do this," I said quietly. "You did." Edward turned to me. "This is your decision." I thought of student loans. Of skipped meals. Of nights spent staring at a ceiling wondering how I'd survive. "Proceed," I said. The word landed heavy and final. The apartment stood high above the city, glass and steel overlooking the bay. Pacific Heights was quiet, elegant, untouched by the chaos that had ruled my life for years. The doorman smiled politely. "Ms. Lawson. We've been expecting you." Those words felt unreal. Inside, the apartment was immaculate. Marble counters. Neutral furniture. Carefully staged art. It smelled like expensive candles and secrets. Someone else's life had been lived here, comfortably, using my name and my money. I walked slowly through each room, fingertips brushing the walls, the furniture, the evidence of theft disguised as luxury. On the kitchen counter sat a folder. Lease agreements. Tenant deposits. Years of collected rent. My parents hadn't just taken my money. They'd built a second life with it. I sank onto the couch and laughed, a raw, broken sound. Then the laughter cracked into tears. Not grief. Release. 20 minutes later, Maya knocked, holding takeout bags like a peace offering. "You're really here," she whispered, eyes wide. "I am," I said. "I think I'm home." We sat on the floor like we used to, curtains spread between us, the city glowing beyond the windows. "So," she asked softly, "how does justice feel?" I thought about it. "Quiet," I said. "And heavier than I expected." That night, I slept without fear for the first time in years. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Assets were frozen. Properties seized. Cars sold. Even the Malibu house, my mother's pride, was liquidated. Jonathan explained everything calmly, professionally. "Restitution has been ordered. Payments will continue for years." I didn't feel joy when he said it. Only balance. I returned to freelancing, but something had changed. The panic was gone. I wasn't scrambling anymore. Clients came easily, introductions from my grandfather's network, startups needing branding, companies that paid on time. For the first time, I could choose. Maya came over every weekend. We unpacked boxes. Hung art. Turned the space into something warm and lived in. "You realize," she laughed one night, "you could buy the whole building." "I don't want more things," I replied. Just more peace. Each morning, I sat on the balcony with coffee, watching the fog roll over the bay. The city felt different now, not threatening, but open. Money hadn't healed everything. But ownership had healed something deep. Months passed before the noise in my head finally quieted. Not all at once, and not gently, but slowly, like a storm moving out to sea. Life didn't magically become perfect. It became honest. One evening, while driving home, I passed the restaurant where everything had unraveled. Through the tall glass windows, I could see people laughing, raising glasses, celebrating something I would never know. For a moment, I considered stopping. Walking inside. Standing where I once sat, unaware of how close my world was to collapsing. I kept driving. Some places are meant to stay in the past. Blood, I learned, doesn't automatically mean loyalty. And family isn't defined by shared names or genetics, but by who protects you when you're vulnerable. My parents had taken my future and dressed it up as guidance. They taught me silence and called it maturity. Obedience and called it love. I used to believe that standing up for myself meant causing pain. That choosing myself made me selfish. But sitting in my apartment now, watching the city lights scatter across the bay, I understand how wrong I was. What they did to me wasn't love. It was control. I didn't scream. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't even confront them again after the court dates ended. I let the law speak for me. I let the truth do the work. Piece by piece, everything they'd taken was returned, not just the money, but the years of confidence they had drained from me. My grandfather once told me, strength doesn't need an audience. Only now do I understand what he meant. I wake up each morning without fear. I work because I want to, not because I'm desperate. I say no when something feels wrong. I say yes when something feels right. Those choices used to terrify me. Now they feel natural. Maya still comes over every weekend. We drink coffee on the balcony and laugh about things that once would have broken me. The apartment no longer feels like evidence of betrayal. It feels like a starting point. I don't look out over the bay and see loss anymore. I see resilience. I see a woman who was underestimated, silenced, and used, and who quietly reclaimed her life. If you've ever been betrayed by the people you trusted most, remember this: you don't have to burn everything down to rebuild. Sometimes the strongest revenge is survival, clarity, and peace. And this time, my future belongs to me.